Very good, very good. So we're going to start actually our session. Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you so much, Janelle, for joining us. Thank you to all the teachers for
Okay.
being here with us today. It's been an amazing conference, and we are so excited to have you all here and to have this wonderful session on how to boost the students' talking time through Zoom sessions. I know it's quite a challenge, and we're all here because we want to learn the tricks and knickknacks on how to get this done. So we're so excited. Janelle, Chris, this is just an amazing time for us. We are so happy to have you here. We would love to hear more of who you are before you start this session. And right before you do that, though, I want to invite everybody, if you want to join us here on stage, sorry for that, then you can do it with video and mute your microphone so you don't have amazing background noise like I do right now. Thank you very much. And if not, you can join us in the chat over there and just put your questions and answers if you have any on the questions and answer tab. And then we will read them to Chris and to Janelle so they can answer them the best way they can. Thank you so much and welcome. And the stage is all yours, guys.
Okay, let's get started. So actually, I'm going to go ahead one slide so we can introduce ourselves a little bit. So I'm working today with my coworker, Chris, and Chris has been an International Language Institute instructor in our IEP program and the academic coordinator since 2008. We actually started the same year, the same summer, which has been an exciting time to be able to work together and develop our IEP program together. And I am Janelle.
Yeah.
Basically, sorry, Chris.
Right, and I'm Chris, and we've been working together for since 2008, developing the IEP together, and developing all our activities, all our curriculum, and teaching full time. And it's been an incredible journey, especially the last couple of years.
Yeah, and
the focus today.
We're back in person now, so we are teaching live classes back at our school in person with our students, but we were online teaching primarily in Zoom for about 18 months, 16 months during COVID-19. So we're in our second month, starting our third month back in person. But we wanted to share some things that we learned from working in Zoom with students and things that will also work in a live classroom with students. So if you're live, if you're on Zoom or online, this is going to work great, hopefully, for everybody. Chris, do you want to talk about our agenda a little bit and then give your opening speech?
Sure. So during our session, we're going to go over some community building basics that can work, as Janelle said, online or in person. And moving on to a big theme, number 2, student scripts, kind of like prefabricated conversations and sentence starters and rituals that put the energy into the students' hands to drive the discussion and the conversation. Then we'll look at some creative ways that we've learned to use Google Docs to encourage collaboration, especially in breakout rooms or using Teams and Meets. You may have different options for how you can stimulate group work and pair work online. And finally, just a host of different apps, Flipgrid, Quizlet, Padlet, games, and then we'll reserve some time to chat questions. And in terms of an opening speech, I just wanted to make a few comments about, I'm imagining if you're attending this session, you're like us with the pandemic, you're suddenly thrust into this online environment and may have encountered some rocky times and missed the natural energy of face-to-face interaction to spur discussion, collaboration, or language risk-taking. And it can just be hard to get students to talk. You get reticent students. And then sometimes as an instructor, you may feel like you need to fill awkward silences with extraneous explanations. And then group discussions can suffer from crosstalk, confusion, hesitance. And then the breakout rooms can flop if participants lack tangible goals. So let's jump in and start with the first item on our agenda, some of the community building, because this is the basic building blocks of what we found has worked online and in the classroom. And maybe even before we do that, open up the chat a bit for some Q&A. I think we'd like to get a sense of why you're here, what you hope to learn from this session. Did what I just say resonate with you in your online experiences? What challenges you face and continue to face online? So how about we open up for just a few comments or questions so we can help aim our comments and our presentation to your needs and desires.
Remember, you can join us too here if you want to join us with video and audio, so you don't have to type your answers or your questions. You can also do so. And just remember to keep yourself muted while we have the presentation going on. And thank you. You can also participate over there in the chat.
Mm-hmm. Awkward silences, I see.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
We're familiar with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had some internet connection problems, both with teachers and with students a little bit. So that can be frustrating, we know.
And I see a comment, vulnerability. And I'm curious if you could elaborate on what you mean by that. Okay, speaking skills. All students not turning on cameras and mics.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Right, because there's the stick and then there's the carrot of how to get students to be less shy or to turn on their camera and to be present physically in the virtual space.
Great. So let's start moving on.
Let's start.
We encourage you also, if you have any questions at any point, please put them in the chat and we'll try to address them together with the slide that we're talking about or with the idea that we're talking about at the time. And then if you have bigger questions or more general questions, we'll take them at the end also. I see someone said teachers are shy.
Right. We're human beings too.
Yeah. It's, the first day is always tough for me. I always feel really shy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So let's move on to our first slide. And we're going to talk a little bit about community building. And we're going to talk about this in 3 steps. So we're going to discuss the importance of names. Seems like a really basic concept, but we found that in person and especially in Zoom, building it into the script or the speech or the activity that students are using where they need to say their partner's name, including the teacher. So we're going to give you just a couple basic examples. Sometimes the teacher is talking to the student, so we will use their name. So, Chris, what's your take on the issue of? And we'll discuss that issue. We find that sometimes, even though we're in Zoom and you can see the student's name, or in person and they have a name tag, after the first day, students still don't know each other's names. Sometimes after the first month, students still aren't sure about each other's names. So this kind of forces them to be using them all the time.
Right. And also the pronunciation exercise. It's like the first pronunciation exercise, make sure everyone pronounces each other's names perfectly.
Yeah, and we try to avoid, we're teaching in the US, so we also try to avoid having students call us teacher. So we really encourage that they call us Janelle and Chris. And then after a certain amount of time, I tell students, okay, it's been 1 week. You need to remember my name and say it also. So if they say teacher to me, I just don't respond. I don't respond until they say Janelle. So we'll also build it in for students that they need to say their partner's name or say the name of someone in the class when they want them to speak. And we'll build in that they need to say the name when they repeat something that that person said. So for example, I talked to Chris and he told me that he had a great weekend, and then they'll elaborate more on their partner, what their partner had said to them. The next step that we use in community building always in trying to build a safe atmosphere for students to feel comfortable speaking in the first place are turn-taking cues. This has been one of our our greatest
Yeah.
accomplishments in the IEP. The first day that we have students, we teach them the phrase, "I'll go," to volunteer. Because as you know, as teachers, sometimes you will ask a question, you are waiting for a student to volunteer, and it's just silence, or students looking up at the ceiling or looking down at the floor. So we like to teach them this phrase, "I'll go," so that they have a first thing to say before they start with their idea. Chris, you want to take over?
Sure. And then once they finish, you'll say, "Who's next?" The next person says, "I'll go." This is very sticky. By sticky, they remember it fast, and it becomes a ritual. And then when they're finished, the "what did I say?" And we're going to revisit that theme, that idea of always doing a comprehension check among students, not just teacher to student, but giving the both sides of the conversation a job. So the listener has an active job to listen, and then, "Oh, you said that, right? Oh, so Janelle, you just said that, blah, 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 right?" And then when I finish speaking, especially on the first day, I put Janelle on the spot. After I speak, if Janelle's, like my partner, I'll say, "So what did I say?" And then Janelle's already motivated to listen and interact. And then the delay, yes.
Yeah, this having students ask, "What did I say?" to their partner at the end really puts the responsibility on their partner to listen. And sometimes the first time that partner will fail and be a little embarrassed, but we always tell them it's okay. You need to ask your partner to repeat it then. So their partner will say the whole thing again.
Yeah.
"What did I say?" And then they can repeat what they heard. And it really only takes them about one time of not listening to kind of to stay tuned in when their partner is talking. And then the last step of turn-taking cues, we like to teach them a delay. So if they get called on and they're not prepared or they're uncomfortable or for any reason they don't want to speak, they can say, "I can't think of anything. Could you come back to me?" And then you come back to them. That's the important thing. They don't get out of it, but they can delay their response for a few minutes. We'll also teach them the phrase "name," so they can ask another person in the group, "Can you help me out?" If it's something about spelling or just remembering something, they can choose someone else to help them. And then the last step is what we're going to focus on the most for this presentation, are classroom rituals. So warm-ups, games, and scripts that you can use and you can modify really easily to suit the level of your class and to suit the needs and the goals of your students. Okay, so we're going to start by talking about scripts a little bit. And I think this is your first script, Chris.
Yes. Well, we're going to talk about some keys to effective scripts.
Okay.
So like I mentioned before, there's active jobs for both the A and the B speaker.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So, and as fixed grammar structures as a foundation, you already got a taste of that with like the "what did I say?" There's a lot of lists. They're like first, second, and third. Sentence starters that might recycle grammar from an earlier lesson. And then, of course, freedom to personalize and elaborate, often with "because ... or when ... or after ... Okay. And then they're breakout room ready so that they can be repeated. You'd model it together and then put them into a group, whether it be Zoom or other partner options for the other platforms.
So for example, instead of sending them to a breakout room with a question prompt and saying, "Talk about your weekend," and having them go to the breakout room or the private room space and potentially not talking at all, we will send them with a script, one of the scripts that we're going to show you in just a moment. Let's talk about the benefits.
Yeah. So the students will share responsibility, the A, B, back and forth. You have the community building with the names and also learning about each other's lives. And when they listen and repeat each other's lives, the facts of what they have in common and their shared experiences just kind of grow organically. And then they will reinforce language points. It could be grammar forms from an earlier lesson, vocabulary that you've been recycling all week, and then phrases to recap, agree, disagree, respond, list, interrupt, elaborate, clarify, et cetera, et cetera. You can keep plugging in different fixed phrases.
Okay, so we're going to look at our first script.
Yeah. And we have quite a few in here, so we can kind of run through them quickly, and then these will be available afterwards. And like we said, these are endlessly tweakable and changeable. That's part of my ritual and lesson planning is figuring out what scripts I'm going to use and take an old one and tweak it or change it or make it more relevant. One ritual that has worked for a long time in a lot of different levels, but even the lower levels, are the idea of 2 truths and a lie. 2 true things, 1 lie. I think we're all familiar with that basic game from when we were kids. But this is just a great way to warm up, build community, and also practice using new vocabulary when you lie, because you can make up something crazy. Allows the students to do some more language risk taking. So they're not stuck in the same 3 verbs that they do every night. They can start adding new vocabulary. Yeah, I saw someone remark their students love this game. And I always change the expressions, add when it starts getting stale. It's great for verb tenses because it can be like Monday, it's simple past for what you did on the weekend, and you can add Friday night and Saturday morning at specific times. If it's Wednesday, it could be so far this week with present perfect. It could be on Friday, it could be 3 plans for the weekend. So you can keep varying the verb tenses. And at the lower levels or lower intermediate levels, so much of what the students need is practicing verb forms. And then you have the basic sentence connectors that first, second, third, or after that, before. I think we have some more examples. Yeah.
Chris, you snuck in this phrase, "I'm in a good mood." So you got this expression mixed in. And then at the bottom, you've got your green phrase and your red phrase that we're giving them this extra, like, "I'm not kidding. Try again."
They love try again. It just adds levity. And this is one great way to have some laughter in the first 10 minutes. That goes a long way towards making a productive, loud class.
And in general, I would say, I'm not sure if this is always true for your class, Chris, but in my class, we don't use the phrase "you're wrong." We always use
never.
We will use "not exactly," "not exactly."
Not exactly.
And we tell students that means try again. Or we will use the phrase "try again."
Yeah.
So students don't hear that "you're wrong."
Good guess. Or like,
or
like, just good guess, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nice guess.
It's always super positive. Yeah, I think we have a couple more 2 truths and a lie in here. Yeah, the 2 trusts so far. Again, they're very expandable on what the students can handle. Lower level class start with something super simple, and then later on fold in more.
You got perfect for the middle of the week.
Yeah, like this one would definitely. I mean, again, they're very sticky. So the next day, one of my beginning level students, next day, instead of saying yes, just said definitely. You just plant the seed. You start planting these seeds, and because it's part of a ritual, first thing in the morning, I think the seeds grow sooner than later during the week. All right, so what's next? And sharing. This is after partner work. I just did this last week. What did you find out? They've been doing phrasal verbs, so they already knew find out, but I added a little definition. I found out that it's true. Is that right? And all that cross to like, oh, is that right? And they're like, right. And I find that it creates a real positive forward momentum. So people are using their voices more and more, even if they're using their voice just to say, yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's right.
They get that chance to, sometimes a partner will repeat what they heard. And at the end, they will say, is that right? And their partner will say, no, that's not what I said. But they have a chance to correct that.
Yeah.
So that we do get the right information in the end.
Right. Okay. And here's another one that was capable of, this is always fun, things that you're capable of doing. And this would be during a unit on adjective plus preposition plus gerund. So it was, the grammar was being reinforced just through the script.
Capable of doing, change it to interested in doing, change it to scared of doing.
Yeah.
So you can get a lot of mileage out of the same script by just changing that key phrase that you want to practice.
And that one ended with, okay, you're next. I found myself doing that more and more. I mean, at first, in terms of teachers being shy, at first I was hesitant. I wanted to be a little gentler, like, all right, who's next? And then someone says, I'll go. But there's a few situations, especially when people warm up, the students get to choose the next speaker. So I start the relay, and then they pass the baton. And it's worked great. It's never felt too heavy-handed or weird.
Yeah, so these scripts are designed most of the time for the teacher to be able to, as Chris said, begin it, and then it gets to the end of the script, and that student will choose the next student, and then the script will just go in a circle. And as a teacher, you're really hands-off.
Right.
You're just listening to them talking, maybe making some notes about corrections that you want to talk about at the end. But as a teacher, you don't need to stay in the middle and be telling who or saying who needs to speak next. And that's really nice. I'm a shy teacher, so I love this style because I can kind of sit back and let the students do all of the work.
Yeah. We have some more examples that's coming up of the infinite repeat, like the infinite loop kind of scripts that could go on. All right, here's just another example of two truths and a lie with more idioms, with some more writerly connectors of last but not least, stuff like that. Okay. I guess we can, I'll talk about this one first. We both use the color vowel chart with our students. No matter the level, we find it's a useful way of really honing in on vowel pronunciation, creating a shared way of understanding pronunciation of new vocabulary. Here's something that I did with some lower level students on phones. I've seen some people in the chat commenting about students have tablets, technology issues. This was something that worked well with students who ran the gamut from at a laptop to kind of lying on a couch with a phone, even hesitant to turn on their camera. So this is just a snapshot of a longer lesson. Well, first they learned how to pronounce the different vowels. And then we were building in sensory adjectives. So this was the listening and hearing adjective lesson. So they had already figured out on their own that loud sound like brown cow. And I start the relay and I say, I can hear something loud, at home when my husband turns off the TV or something. And the student says that, and then they get to choose the next person. I say, Janelle, where can you hear something loud? And then you answer, and they pass the relay around.
Yeah, so we like this because the students have the ability to personalize or to make choices about what they want to go in that blank space. So we're not just giving them one question that they can end and then say, we finished already and stop working. So really, this is something they can keep going until they finish everything on the list. They can leave things out that they don't want to talk about, or something that maybe they can't think of an answer, but they can think of an answer for something else.
Okay, and then role plays. Just using role plays in class. We've all done that, and just kind of beefing up a role play with a script. So you have a situation. This comes from a class where they're doing more like professional development, workplace scenarios. Want to take a look at the script?
Yep.
And so, and this had some business idioms in it that I went over while we reviewed the script. The script was a little more intense for the students, so we spent some time talking about it. And I practiced it with one student Like I was A or B with another student together in a large group. They have idioms like touch base and get the ball rolling. They got a kick out of those. And there's empty spaces. They get a little more planning time. And this is something they could do in a breakout room as well.
Nice. So Chris, you're saying that if it is something that's a little bit more complicated of an idiom or an expression, that you pre-teach it or practice it before you send them to practice this.
Yeah. You know, there's some scripts make their own sauce really fast, and others are a little more intense and also may require, you know, a little 2 minutes quiet time to think about your situation. I think these were some sentence starters and scripts for sharing after they came from a breakout room. Yep. So let's say they have a discussion task in a breakout room and they're going to come back and share with the larger group.
And we would use this for talking about basically any topic.
Sure.
Really go-to phrases. Is there more the same? So some phrases for brain.
You'll notice a lot of phrasal verbs in here because we let our students pick topics that we will practice in class, and that's one of the perennial favorites. Students vote for phrasal verbs.
We always vote for phrasal verbs.
Yeah, I love phrasal verbs. We love phrasal verbs too because you can do so much with them. You can do TPRs, act outs, role plays.
We wanted to talk a little bit also about the importance of making the student the teacher whenever possible. So anytime we're explaining vocabulary in a group, or we're going over the answers to questions, or we're explaining any question that really comes up in class, we like to give students the opportunity to answer that first and be the teacher. And sometimes we will also make the students the teacher in a more formal way. They need to go up to the board and have markers and call on students. But these are some of the phrases that we would use for having students be the teacher.
Yeah. Especially if it's something that I've already explained, or if I'm doing more of a grammar lesson where I do have to do some grammar presentation and I realize I just talked for 5 minutes and I'll be, okay, what did I say? And it might be a little script for that. Like say, we talked about simple present and they wanted me to explain something about simple present. So I explained it and then I'll say, what did I say? And there could be sentence starters like this, or we did some error correction, difference between fun and funny. I explained it and like, what did I say? What is the difference? And you could take the pressure off so one student doesn't have to like deliver the entire grammar. Like, what's one thing you understood from what I said? With a lot of room for error and a room for like, I understood something very small or something more global. Yeah. And with a little sentence starter script, like I'll go, one thing I learned about simple present is blah, blah, blah. Okay, you're next, Janelle. What did you learn about simple present?
Oh, nice. And we're still giving them in yellow at the bottom that out. If they have a moment of panic, they can say, I'm not sure. Give me a minute to think. Can you come back to me?
Yeah. Always pull the chute on the parachute.
Yeah.
Pull the string on the parachute.
So here's some more examples of the student working as the teacher.
Yeah.
And this was from a unit that Chris had done about medical breakthroughs. They had read several articles and practice writing sentences on the topic. And
it's comprehension. It's also vocabulary review because it's really they're going to be reviewing how to describe the innovation that they had read about. This was after a couple weeks, so they had a lot to draw on to pick their favorite fact that they learned.
Nice. More student as teacher. This is what Chris was saying before when he had talked about the simple present tense. And then he asked the student, so what did I just say?
Yeah, right.
It's a fast way to check with them and make them accountable for their own note taking also during grammar presentations.
Yeah.
And this is what a more elaborate script might look like.
It's really more like a mini presentation where the students have to present a vocabulary word. I think you've done this a bit with the advanced class too,
Yeah.
Janelle. And I've done a simpler version with other students. But you can see it's a way of like the student teaches the rest of the class the pronunciation, the meaning, an example, why it's important to the article, or why it's important every day.
And again, these are words that we would have already gone over in class, and they're getting a second chance to teach this word to the class and have them repeat it as pronunciation to remember it. This is a general script that could be used for vocabulary review after working with any text or any video clip or any presentation idea.
Yeah.
So they get to choose a word that they want to discuss. And this frequently is from a determined list. So I, as the teacher, will determine like these are the 20 words open for discussion because I know that students generally know the meaning of them. And then I'll open it up for them to be the teacher, choose something that they want to discuss, have the students practice pronouncing it with them, and then explain why this word is important to the article. Important to the topic or important to everyday life. And then as you can see right at the end, they get to the end and they ask the next person what they want to talk about next. And so again, as a teacher, you can sit back and have them drive this activity. Another example of a student as the teacher. And this is about preparing a presentation. So in this activity, students prepare a brief presentation about their country. But before they go home and just write a presentation, they write questions for the audience to ask them. And this puts all the power in the presenter's hands. And it's kind of a cool activity. They get the power to write the questions that they are going to take from the audience so that then they can prepare the answers. They don't need to feel nervous. They know what the audience is going to ask them, but they don't know when. They don't know the order that they will be asked the questions. And they still get to practice taking questions from an audience, which is really important for them when they're practicing their language skills and especially getting ready to do presentations at university level.
We've also modeled it as a press conference where each audience member has like, say, 4 different colored index cards, and each color corresponds to a topic. Like the pink card has a question about sports in your country. The blue card has a question about food. The green one has a question about politics, for example. And the presenter gets to call on audience members. This is also a great chance to practice location and like, yes, the gentleman in the yellow plaid shirt, and they get to call, to the left, to the right. They call on, and they get to choose because I want to answer a sports question. So they'll call on the person who's holding up the pink card. Or I don't want to answer politics. They'll call on the audience member holding up a green card. So it's like the audience are reporters and the presenter. Again, the presenter is in control, but the audience has an active job, has a fun job, has a stress-free job because they got the questions all ready to go provided to them.
And then as an instructor in this style of activity, we will generally take notes either on index cards or just, scrap paper of things that we want to correct after the fact. We don't generally interrupt students to correct them while they are speaking. We do all of our corrections at the end. We want to encourage them to increase their fluency and just stay on track and say their ideas and feel comfortable talking. And not fluster them, not make them nervous during their presentation. We love this presentation plan because each student can talk for 30 minutes at least. If you have 8 students, like boom, 4 hours, there you go. And as a teacher, you didn't need to prepare anything.
And we do like a lot of PowerPoint slides too with this. And we'll give them the template And their scripts will always have these check-ins with the audience, so it's not just one person talking in a monologue or blabbing on. That's why it's great to have these scripts.
Okay. So we have another script that I have used in my class. I had a higher level class, and one of the things that I try to do in all of my scripts is to use either it's not exactly an expression. I try to use like an academic phrase in my scripts. So in this script, my academic phrase is the idea in terms of plus noun, meaning connected to. And I chose to have them talk about their weekend because I wanted them to become comfortable using the phrase in terms of with a topic that they didn't need to research or they didn't need to know a lot about and they could speak comfortably about. So I just went with their weekend. So the question is, what are you going to do this weekend in terms of, and then they chose a noun from the list. So what are you going to do this weekend in terms of the internet? What are you going to do this weekend in terms of your English? What are you going to do this weekend in terms of nature? And then their partner would answer in terms of nature. For example, I'm going to, and they're practicing using I'm going to talk about their future plans at the same time. This was an ABC script, so I had 3 students at the time. If I don't have 3 students in a group, I will just alter it and change it back into AB. That's pretty easy to do.
Yeah, and it has that nice infinite loop on it too. Okay, now you ask me a question and of all these topics.
Yeah. And they can go forever because they have this whole list of nouns. Yeah. So you can leave them in a breakout room, check in on them, but leave them for 15, 20 minutes easily, and they can keep talking. And at the end of this activity, so at the end of this script, I had everyone give a 1-minute speech about their weekend plans. And they did that using sequencing adverbs because that was the grammar that we were practicing at the time. So I had them use in terms of nature. First, in terms of nature, I'm going to, and then they would add second, before that, next, in conclusion. And then their partner had a listening job also.
Yeah. 1-minute speeches, we definitely use that a lot. Like that,
okay. Yeah. I've used a little bit of a different style of script before. This was something that I did inside of Google, inside of the Google Suite, and I used Google Slides for this. So during this presentation, or during this, it was a Foursquare discussion, I gave my students phrases to use to talk about their opinion, to agree and disagree, to ask questions, and to add information. And then on a separate paper, we had a list of topics. So they had different discussion topics to choose from. For example, I think one of the topics was, should everyone become a vegetarian to help save the planet, to help the environment? So in this case, students needed to use one phrase from each box before the discussion was over. So their group needed to keep talking until everyone had said one of the 4 phrases. And the way that we kept track of this was that each student had an icon that represented them. So one person was a sun, a smiley face, a moon, and a heart. And every time that they spoke, they would take their icon and move it into the box just to keep track that they had already used that phrase. And as an instructor, then you can jump in and see what's going on. You can see who's talking a lot, who hasn't talked yet. And you can see how the balance is going of talkers and listeners in that group. So this worked really well for us. And then one of the final scripts that I have is actually from last week. So we're adding things up until the last minute. And this is something that I did in person, but I think that it would work great online if you were doing an online class also. I did this with a lower level class. So this was a CEFR level A1, high A1. And so if you're not familiar with the Common European Framework, these are very elementary students. So not 0 level, but kind of still beginners. And we had just read a very simple story about a man who won the lottery, but threw his ticket in the trash. And then he had to go look for his ticket at the dump. So we had already talked about this idea of winning the lottery. And then as a closure activity, as an expansion activity, I had my students give a presentation about what they would do if they won the lottery. They're not ready to use if I won the lottery, I would. So I made everything simple present so that they could just talk about the future. So conditional 1, if I win the lottery, I will. And I had them prepare by writing some sentences first and answering some questions that I asked them. So these are just the first 3 slides from their presentation that they gave. But I did give them the first slide to help them introduce themselves and say what they were going to talk about. And then the second slide is my favorite part. Oops, I'm on the wrong screen. I'm on the right screen. Okay, there we go. I put the question at the top, what will you buy if you win the lottery? And then students followed this script. So first, I will talk about what I will buy if I win the lottery. Can you guess? And then they made their partners make guesses. So everyone in the class needed to make one guess. So they said, I'll go. If you win the lottery, will you buy a new car? And every time someone made a guess, the presenter didn't say yes or no. We wanted to keep it a mystery. The presenter only said, good guess. Maybe I will buy a new car if I win the lottery. And they would ask the next person to guess. So after everyone in the class guessed, then the presenter moved on and they showed their answer. So at the end, the presenter said, let's look at my answer. Are you ready? Everyone in the class said yes. And then we moved on to the next slide. So in their next slide, they had 2 pictures of things that they will buy if they win the lottery. And then they talked about those 2 things. If I win the lottery, I will buy a horse because, and if I win the lottery, I will buy a pool because, or they elaborated in their own way. And then there were more questions. So this presentation had, I believe, 6 or 7 question slides. If I win the lottery, I will travel to.
Yeah. Help. Who will I help? Where will I travel? Who will I share it with?
So this was really an effective way at a lower level to have the audience still participating and able to ask questions during a presentation instead of remaining completely silent. So that was really exciting and students got into it. They started like, I'll go, I want to guess. So I heard some crazy guesses and I heard some really thoughtful guesses and some funny guesses. And it was nice. They had the opportunity to be thoughtful or creative or try to be funny all at the same time. That was really nice. I think that's the end of the slides that we have. Oh, we've got a couple things about Google Docs.
Right. Those are, I think those are our scripts. Yeah.
So we want to talk about Google Docs for a couple minutes before we take questions.
Yeah. So
Chris, do you want to talk about virtual whiteboard?
Well, sure. So one thing is when we're doing Zoom classes, I would create a shared Google Doc that would just be, June 2020 that everyone shared with, and you can create tables that each student could write in. And so we could all be writing together. I can use it as a whiteboard if I'm presenting and I'm eliciting questions, eliciting information and taking notes. If they're listening to an audio, they can take notes and see what each other are writing. Yeah, I mean, I think you use some of this too. And we're going to talk about doing it in tabs also. So
Yes.
we would color code group shared documents. So there'd be like the orange group has one shared Google Doc, the green group has another shared Google Doc. And when they go into the breakout rooms, they work together to like fill out a table, answer questions. The script could be placed inside that doc so they can all look at the script as they're talking. I did something where we learned how to create a Venn diagram with one of the advanced students. So we did a listening, and then they created a Venn diagram about the similarities and differences about the topic they listened to, and then they brainstormed an essay and kept track of their ideas by making the Venn diagram in the shared Google Doc. The great advantage of this, maybe this, Janelle, this is what you're going to say, is that you can monitor what the groups are doing. So you can be in the main session and you can click along the tabs of the orange group, the green group, and the blue group and see how they're doing, and then pop in if necessary, or if not, just observe.
Yep. So you obviously can't, if you're only looking at the tabs, you can't hear them talking unless you go into the room with them. But I found it for myself just an effective quiet time. As an instructor, I could send them to their groups, but I could keep track of them in these tabs in terms of just seeing that they're working and they're writing. So that's all I would do is I would click on the orange group. I'd make sure the cursor was moving and they're writing, and I could see who was typing and what was going on. And then I would jump into the next tab and make sure that that group was working also. And as long as they were working fine, I might not even go into their group to listen to them in Zoom. I would just have them come back together at the end. We also did some activities where we created a shared Google slide document, and this was really effective also because students can choose which slide they want to be on inside of their breakout room. So we did a Google slide presentation using the grammar "would you rather" in my class. And I created, I don't know, there were 20 questions. Would you rather drive to California or fly to California? Would you rather have more time or more money? And I shared this document with the students. They already knew the grammar, so this was just a practice activity for them. And they went into their breakout room, and then they had the opportunity to jump around and choose which questions they wanted to talk about. And that's great. We love to always give them choice when we can, because we find that they work better and they talk more and they sustain their conversations longer when they feel like they have some choice in what they get to talk about.
Right. And beyond the slides there, if they have a master list of activities, they can just start creating their own would you rather, and then you get that infinite loop.
Yes.
And I think you have a little video of a couple of our students who are doing exactly that.
It's not the most amazing video, but we have a couple students talking.
Is that okay with you? I'm okay with that. Do you want to go skiing this weekend? Actually, I'd rather watch a movie at home.
Janelle, sorry, I had to mute you because it was looping the sound. So if you can just unmute your microphone.
Okay, I had to come back into the right screen. There we go.
You're still muted.
Ah, I am?
Yeah, I think you're unmuted now.
I'm unmuted now.
Yeah.
You can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But you could hear the students talking in the video. Okay. In the video, they had the opportunity to invite a student to do something, and the other student was respectfully, politely declining and saying like, I don't want to go skiing. I'd rather ride bikes this weekend. And then the script continued and they worked out a compromise together. So we're trying to give them some phrases to help them compromise in their conversations.
So, and we do have a bunch more slides. I saw someone mention Jamboard, and I think we have a Jamboard slide. We also were going to mention Flipgrid and gamification through some sites where you can flip coins or roll dice, because flipping coins and rolling dice is a physical object we really wanted to create online, where there's 6 options, and so you roll a dice or flip a coin. But I think we got 10 more minutes, so did we want to open up the floor for some questions, or should we just forge ahead?
If there are questions, let's take questions. If nothing,
actually, we do have one. Somebody asked, how can I add listening practices on Google Forms? Thank you.
We don't use Google Forms. That's a great question. We are really I am really familiar with using Google Docs, Google Slides, and Google Forms to create short questionnaires. But I ran into many problems with Google Forms early on in teaching online, and then I'm sad to say I just gave it up and found different ways to do the things that I wanted to do. So I don't know the answer. Maybe Chris?
No. Sorry. I haven't used Google Forms.
But I did find YouTube really useful when I was trying to learn new things. So I just was always checking YouTube and looking for other teachers that please had made a video answering my questions.
I mean, our main LMS, we do use Google Classroom. So we might post an MP3 file if they're doing listening for homework or as a flipped lesson. During class, well, I think we've done it both ways. We've done it so that we'll play it live over the platform, and they can make notes in a shared Google Doc, maybe in a table where each student has their own line to write, and they could see what each other are writing, and I can see what they're writing as we listen, answering some questions or taking notes. We've also sent them a file and given them 10 minutes to listen at their own pace if they and their partner want to replay a part under time constraints. And upload the audio to Google Drive and embed the link. I've just used the chat in Zoom to send files. But just post it in Google Classroom is the easiest way to do it because they're all on Google Classroom. So I can just post it.
That's our basic workaround for that.
Yeah.
And they could still have the audio file. I did have to create some videos that I made myself. I uploaded to YouTube just for like size benefits so that I could just give them a link to YouTube. It adds an extra step. It takes more time. But if it was a video that I knew that I wanted to use again and it was mine, I would share it that way. And otherwise, I used a lot of YouTube videos, and then I could just share that link with them and link it into Google Classroom, as Chris said.
Yeah.
Do we have any more questions? Anybody else that has a doubt, a comment maybe on what we've been hearing? I think we have a very grateful crowd right now. They are really grateful, and I think it's going to be really helpful to all of us. If you have any doubts, we still have a couple minutes. So take advantage of our amazing speakers here, Chris and Janelle.
So we can talk about a couple more slides if you'd like. And then if anybody has a question, we could answer our final questions. Does that work? Chris, do you want to talk about the coin flip?
Sure. It's just it's a simple little app on a website, and I can put in different values or words on the pro con. So it could be, what are you unable to do? What's a pro or con of social media? And so each student has their own link. They flip it, and it's just this easy, simple way to get a little bit of that gamification in a warm-up activity.
Yeah, it's fun. You get to flip a coin online. We
Yeah.
also have some activities with rolling dice.
Yeah. So yeah, they love this. So it could be 6 question words, 6 days of the week, 6 adjectives. The 6 could it could be anything. Could you go to the next slide? I think it has another example of what the it could be frequency adverbs.
There we go.
Yeah, it could be the 6 question words. Frequency adverbs sometimes, often, never, rarely. Different times of the day, like what were you doing, could be a past continuous. What were you doing at? And then they have 3 choices, and then they can choose if it's at night or in the morning. And so that's what the slide. I think the next slide has tell me something scary or annoying, and we're doing. Oh, no, there's a frequency adverb one.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yep. So this is
There's a frequency adverb. What do you? And they get so the dice tells them which frequency adverb they have to use, and then the pink box gives them a verb
to choose
that they can choose from, and that's a infinite choice right there. And then the next one has exciting, scary. And in this one, they were the little grammar point that was being snuck in there was just ing and ed adjectives, the difference between bored and boring. So the listener's job was to recap quickly, but the script had them changing the ing. So person A said something something boring that they did, and then person B is like, so you were bored when you blah, blah, blah.
In my classes and in Chris's classes, we used Flipgrid a lot. I'm not sure if you're familiar. It's an app that's free, and you can use it to record short videos up to 15 minutes. So actually that gives you a lot of freedom. And students can use it to record videos also. So we use this in class. Sometimes I would record a video question, and they needed to go and record themselves responding to my question. So they got some extra listening practice to my question and speaking practice in the video. I also used it frequently to have them practice for presentations or speeches before going live. So the night before, they needed to make a video where they practice saying their speech or saying their presentation at least one time before they gave it to the class. I had them record video comments for their peers. And I recorded pronunciation feedback specific to individual students. And they always loved that. So it was like, you've been saying this wrong, or I heard this mistake in your presentation. They liked it because they got to watch the video in private and practice it as many times as they wanted to at home in private.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then I also used it for dictations when I didn't have time in class to finish something. I would create a quick video with a dictation or explain a word in English, and they had to guess the word that I explained, or again, ask them questions that I wanted them to answer. And then we had it open in the end just for students to share something that maybe they didn't have time to say in class, because our online time was very limited at the time. So they still had the opportunity to make a video, submit it, and the teacher would listen and give them feedback.
Time is always just playing against us, like right now. We would love to be hearing more about this, but it is time to close the session. So thank you very much to all of you for having joined us today throughout these wonderful sessions.